The nation's top-ranked college basketball team returns to action on Saturday when Kansas visits Kansas State. Star beat writers Gary Bedore and Jesse Newel break down the 293rd Sunflower Showdown, the rivalry contest that ended in a brawl the last time the teams met. This is SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Friday, February 28th. After a break, Jesse and Gary tackle some other topics, including the idea of KU not being the top seed in the Midwest region in the NCAA tournament. Oh, short of losing a few games down the stretch, which is unlikely, KU will be a top seed, but don't lock them into the Midwest region just yet. Jesse explains why. We also talk about the Jayhawks' top candidates for postseason honors. They've got a few. So here's Jesse and Gary talking Kansas basketball. Jesse and Gary are here, and I imagine there have been times in the history of the Sunflower Showdown where Kansas and Kansas State met as a first place and a last place team, but it probably hasn't happened in a long time. I wouldn't think. Kansas State just hadn't finished last, and Kansas is always Kansas. So it makes this game just a little unusual for Kansas to go to Manhattan and be such an overwhelming favorite. I haven't seen a line yet. Have you seen a line yet, Jesse?
No, it should be 12 or 13, somewhere in that range.
That's what you're thinking. But Sam Mellinger and I talked yesterday on yesterday's podcast about Bruce Weber and what this season has been for the Wildcats. But one thing you can say this for K-State, they're gonna have a pretty good idea about who the nation's best team is after this week, having played Baylor and Kansas in a span of a few days. What does Gary? What do we think about KU and the way that they came off the Baylor win and played against Oklahoma State on Monday night? I actually was pretty impressed with that.
Yeah, they've won 13 in a row now. I think it is 12 or 13, but they're playing pretty good basketball right now. And since that Baylor game that they lost, they just seem to be getting better. So this game, the game in Lawrence, without those scrap at the end of the game, was such a one-sided game. It was almost like the only story of the night was going to be Christian Brown hitting 5 threes or whatever he did. He just kind of dominated the game. But it was kind of blah. And this game in Manhattan, with them being last, like you said, and KU first, and if KU comes and plays its regular defensive game, you would just think they would control the whole thing like they did in Lawrence. But I guess the only thing we're going to learn is if the rivalry does matter, is the fact that it's a rivalry 90 minutes away going to keep the game close. Because like you asked, how are they playing? I think pretty well. That game at Baylor was pretty impressive, except for how they almost blew it at the end. Could
have closed it out a little better,
yeah.
but they led for 35 minutes in that Baylor game. Look, Kansas State has beaten KU a couple of times. I mean, Bruce Weber has some victories over KU in Manhattan. I don't expect Saturday to be one of those, Jesse, but it's almost like, I don't know, maybe the Wildcats' last chance to make a good impression on the season. And I don't think anybody in the world would expect them to win, but maybe they could just draw a line in the sand that they're not this horrible a team.
Yeah, it's tough because I think you're right. I'm trying to think back to when one was first place, one was last place. I was thinking back to the Big 8 tournaments. I remember KU and K-State played as a 1-8 game one time. And so it has been a while. I don't think these teams have been separated like this in quite some time. But you also have the underlying fact that these two teams brawled last time. And K-State fans, they get one chance, or K-State students especially, get one chance to have KU's basketball team come to their place. And they are going to be loud. They are going to bring signs. They are going to be ready. They are going to scream things in the pregame that KU's players have not heard all year. And so maybe, like you said, Blair, if there's ever a moment for K-State to come together as a team, to be united, to play well, it would seem to be that this would be the time to do that. However, I almost, it's kind of a dangerous thing, too, because you could see the opposite happening, which is, what if KU gets up 20-4? I mean, Is it just going to empty out at halftime? Do those fans just not stick around? So, yeah, it's a difficult thing to try to predict here because I could definitely see some of these emotional things coming together here, and K-State, because of that, playing well. And I also could see that really just being a sort of a pregame thing before, hey, KU comes out here and dominates an opponent, and K-State is kind of left with students standing there like, don't want to be around here anymore.
Gary mentioned it. I remember the first game. I was here for the first game in Lawrence, and Christian Brown had the really good game, and I think we all kind of agreed that was the story of the game in the 39 minutes and 59 seconds of play. Had 20 points. I don't think he's topped that since, has he?
I don't think so.
20's been his best, and maybe I don't know. Maybe that'll be a story going into this game, as it was Christian Brown's the anonymous great game by Christian Brown. But listen, the way Kansas has been playing lately, how do you see this thing unfolding? What does Kansas State have to do? What does any opponent really have to do to have any kind of success against Kansas?
Probably hit some threes and hope KU doesn't hit them, because usually KU doesn't hit them, but they've had a couple games of late they've made 9 or 10. But aside from that, I guess if Doak's on kind of a roll, he's had 2 monster games in a row, maybe keep him to reasonable numbers, try the double, triple team, and hope KU, Brown, and Moss can't hit from outside, and Ochai just has, his normal 10-point, 12-point game, and let Dotson get his 22.
Bill addressed it today. We're recording this on Thursday, by the way. Transparency. We like to offer the transparency. That Doak has been so good of passing out of the double and triple teams and finding the open guy, and maybe Kansas is shooting a little bit better because of it, because some of these threes are open looks, and I don't know what Doak's assist rate is these days, but maybe better than you'd expect the 7-footers to be. But it is. What else is Kansas doing particularly well these days, Jesse?
Well, I mean, they're just a good team with how they're constructed. They have 4 guards on the perimeter that are all switchable. They've got guys that can sort of force everything to the outside, kind of like Baylor does, kind of like Texas Tech does. They force things away from the middle, and then because they do that, they force guys right into Udoka Azubuike, who's a great rim protector and has shown himself to be great on the boards, and also a guy that can avoid fouls while he's doing that. So you have that on the defensive end, and now it seems like in the last few games, Bill Self and staff have really figured out how to utilize Udoka Azubuike even when there are double teams from other teams, because they've kept the ball in the middle of the floor. It's really hard to have help defense when everything's in the middle and Doak is full head of steam going straight toward the rim. I mean, you have to pull out one of the guys from the corners to help, and that's just a really long distance to do it. And if you do, then you're leaving somebody wide open in the corner. And for now, Christian Brown's hitting threes and Isaiah Moss is hitting threes. So it's a difficult thing to try to guard. I would say the biggest hope for K-State, and the one strength that they have, and the one thing that kind of plays up at Bramlage Coliseum, is defensively, they get after you. They overplay the passing lanes. They're physical. They might not get all those fouls called on them, but they've been so bad offensively lately. But some of that can be fixed. Is you get a steal, you go in transition, and you hit a layup with nobody guarding you. And so again, if we're talking about KU being so great in the half court, well, the one way to score against that is to get a steal and go to the other end. And KU's been so good at getting the ball to Doak and making things miserable for opponents. Well, if you don't let them get in their offense to begin with, potentially you can hold them down offensively by just stealing the ball before they can really run anything. So I think that for K-State is kind of the biggest hope, is that Bruce Weber kind of has one of those defensive performances from his teams where they're motivated, they get out, they get away with a little bit of pushing and shoving because they're at home, and they play real physical, and that KU doesn't match up with that physicality. And we've seen in moments this year that KU has turned it over. I mean, they turned over 28 times against Duke in the season opener. It's a long time since that moment, but at least the potential is there if K-State really heats things up, that you could solve some of KU's offensive issues, and you also could solve some of their defensive issues by doing one thing that the Wildcats actually do pretty well.
And then if that happens, the crowd will get into it a little bit.
Exactly.
I really do expect a full house at Bramlage on Saturday, and the fans, if they have been staying away, and I don't blame them if they have, for the way the season has unfolded for the Wildcats, they'll come to this game. They absolutely will use their tickets for KU. The other thing I think about with Kansas State is yes, we spent a lot of time talking this year about how much they miss Barry Brown and Dean Wade and Kamau Stokes, but they've also got some returning veterans who haven't had the kind of seasons that they've wanted to have. Xavier Sneed and Cartier Jada, McCall Mayween, all of whom have had decent games against KU in previous years. So, look, maybe it's just one last opportunity for them to make a statement or to bust out and have a good game against the best opponent left on their schedule. So, all right, let's take a break, and when we come back, there are a couple other issues I want to talk to Jesse and Gary about. We'll be back right after this. Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Back with Gary Bedore and Jesse Newel talking KU basketball. The Jayhawks play at Kansas State, Bramlage Coliseum on Saturday, 12:30. Interesting tip time. 12:30 tip. I guess CBS must have some other programming on that day that affects the tip time. So yeah, on CBS. Hey, Jesse, I thought you not only asked a great question to Bill Self today, but he gave you a terrific answer on NCAA tournament seeding. Not so much seeding, but site selection. We know that the 4 regional sites, this isn't the first and second round, but the Sweet 16 and the regional final sites are in the West, Los Angeles, in the East, New York, in the South, Houston, and in the Midwest, Indianapolis. Kansas right now, if the season were to end today, would be the overall number 1 seed. And if this were any other year in college basketball, as we were projecting the tournament, and if you look at any mock draft right now, you would see Kansas as the number 1 seed in the Midwest. But it may not be so easy. It's a reflex action to put the team in its natural region in the Midwest, and where it is closer to that school. But that's not necessarily going to be the case, or doesn't have to be the case.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So if we go back in history, I think the biggest example of this was back in 2016. KU was the number 1 overall seed, and they went to Louisville, which was a few miles closer than Chicago.
So both of the Louisville and Chicago were regional final destinations.
Exactly. The NCAA Tournament Committee sent KU to Louisville. It was a few miles closer, if you look at Google Maps or whatever.
That was the letter of the law. You had to take the team that was the closest. You'd put the team the closest to the site.
And Chicago is one of the top 3 places that KU has alumni. So for Kansas, they would have preferred, as the number 1 overall seed, to play in Chicago. However, because of the law of the land, or exactly the rules that were in place at the time, they were sent to Louisville. And, KU lost to a very good Villanova team that year. So I don't think that
went on to win the national championship.
That anybody's blaming this on, oh my gosh, this is the reason for it. But I know that, people at KU were upset thinking, hey, if they're the number 1 overall seed, they should be able to choose whether, if it's one that's a matter of a few miles. Well, since then, the NCAA has made it so that the number 1 overall seed gets to choose its sites, and nobody else does, but that number 1 overall seed is rewarded by that. So I did ask Bill today, just because it's interesting for Kansas that Indianapolis is closest, and it's pretty easily the closest from distance, but Houston would have some advantages as well, because for one, it's sort of Big 12 country, and then for two, one of the things that could pop into everybody's head is that Indianapolis is being played in the football stadium, Houston is being played in a basketball arena, which
surprised me. I guess I didn't realize it until this came up today, that they're not playing at NRG Stadium, they're playing in the Toyota Center, which is where the Rockets play.
So it could be another thing, but I think Bill Self, when he answered the question, brought up even something I wasn't thinking about, which is very true, though, which is we tend to think of these things like which is closest to Kansas, but if you think about all the 2 seeds out there, where are they going to be closer to, Houston or Indianapolis? And the fact of the matter is almost all of them are closer. You could drop a lot of teams that are very close to Indianapolis that would play Kansas, and Kansas would not have sort of a home court advantage or have more of the home fans. You can't drop very many when you talk about Houston, because Baylor is going to be a number 1 seed along with Kansas. And outside of that, okay, so if you play, Dayton in Houston, okay, well, I mean, Dayton travels well, but Kansas and Dayton are both going to travel about the same amount of fans. You're not going to have a disadvantage. But, yeah, you look at those teams up there, maybe a Creighton, maybe, some of the other ones he was mentioning, or not that he was mentioning, but that we were popping off in our heads, Dayton, even schools in the Midwest like Kentucky could be close to in Indianapolis. So for Kansas, it's sort of an intriguing scenario. And, again, they have to follow through. They have to win some games down the stretch and see how they compare to other teams out there to get the number 1 overall seed. But I don't think that this is a cut and dry thing. I think this is something that actually is going to take some discussion from them to figure out which is the best place for them. I think that they would have the most fans in Indianapolis because it's close to Chicago, which is a big base, but I don't think they'd have too many more because Dallas is a big base too, and that's a nice drive right down 45 to make it to Houston as well. So sort of fascinating in kind of the behind-the-scenes work that KU's going to have to do to figure out which of these sites is going to be best for them.
I find it interesting that in the 2016 example, Kansas might have griped because it inconvenienced fans, because, like you said, it's a connected flight to get to Louisville from anywhere in Kansas City, right? Yeah. This way, if they decided to select Houston, it's a farther distance, certainly from Lawrence and Kansas City, that would inconvenience fans, and fewer seats because Indianapolis is in the dome at Lucas Oil, the stadium now. It used to be a dome, now it's a Lucas Oil Field. So fewer fans would be able to go, and they'd have to go farther from this area to Houston than they would Indianapolis. But as you mentioned, and as Bill said, there might be some competitive reasons to make that call.
It's fascinating. It's one of those behind-the-scenes things that I know a lot of fans have talked about and asked about, like, well, are they just going to go to Indy or not? But it really is their choice this time, and I think with that, they are going to have to take a little bit of time to decide. And it sounds like Bill has thought about it already, just because, it's important. I'm not saying it's a huge impact. I'm not going to affect you 10 points or something, but a point or two, and potentially, getting a team in a true neutral instead of having them be in their backyard, that sort of thing. It definitely could play a factor in what happens here down the stretch.
Hey, Gary, this time of year, especially when a team is going well, as Kansas is, we talk about honors, postseason honors, and who might be who might be favored for that. And that came up in Bill Self's press conference today. And it just occurs to me that you've got 3 players who are pretty strong first-team all-conference candidates in Azubuike, Devon Dotson, and Marcus Garrett. But I also think because of Kansas's position as the top-ranked team, there are some people around the country that are looking maybe for some guidance from people who cover Kansas to kind of lead them into the idea of who would be the best player for Kansas for an All-America slot, first-team All-America, or even a National Player of the Year consideration. There's all kinds of arguments to be made. Doak is the player that nobody else has, but a team doesn't operate unless, like it does, unless Devon Dotson is as effective as he is, and Marcus Garrett may be the defensive player of the year in the country. What are your thoughts on some of this?
Well, I think Dotson would be the guy that would get the National Player of the Year if anybody does. First of all, Doak's free throws are still so bad that how would you have a National Player of the Year who's one of the country's worst in one category? But Dotson,
even though he's leading the nation in field goal percentage.
Yeah.
Right?
But those aren't from 15 feet, Blair.
No, none of them
Dotson's stats are really good. And I think Jesse was saying that Ken Palm isn't he the runaway National Player of the Year?
Yeah, as of right now. And again,
stats.
that's one measurement, and that takes in a lot of factors like how good your team is, and it's basically statistically. So, I mean, it's sort of it can't go in depth into a little bit more of the nuance, which maybe big men are more valuable defensively than guards are, that sort of thing. But as of right now, yeah, he's kind of the runaway favorite for National Player of the Year. It doesn't usually follow the Ken Palm Award, but the numbers out there, just with what you're saying, Gary, that Devon's been efficient. He's taken on the biggest role for Kansas. He scores in the most difficult situations because he doesn't have anybody pass him the ball. He just goes, takes the ball, and scores. And then his free throws, which he's gotten the line a bunch and scored a bunch from there, that's very helpful for an offense as well. You also add in the fact that he leads KU in steals last time I checked. We talk about Marcus Garrett a lot, but I mean, that's a very good thing for a team to have is for your best offensive player or one of your best offensive players to contribute that way defensively. So a lot of the numbers are going to point to Devon. I think a lot of the national people that don't get to watch Kansas every day are definitely going to point to him just because he's leading the Big 12 in scoring, and a lot of the numbers are really nice.
I think there's a lot of influence by Fran Fraschilla and TV people who, if Doak has a big game, you hear, Fran make a case for him, and I think that may influence some folks as well. I thought it was interesting. One thing I heard Bill Self say is he didn't think Devon Dotson could be this good of an offensive player to lead the league in scoring.
Yeah.
Was he at 18 or something?
Yeah.
So Bill was saying that Devon's even better than he thought he could be.
Yeah, and I wrote about this earlier this year. I think we'll kind of get into his brain and sort of what I talked about as well. Like, you go into this season thinking, how can Devon Dotson get better? And there's just two obvious things where he could get better, which is his three-point shooting, which was bad last year, and then his ability in pick and rolls to see the floor and deliver lobs and be a better passer. I mean, if we're being frank, he hasn't gotten much better at either one of those. You know what I'm saying? Like, Devon Dotson is sort of the same player in that regard, and Bill Self talks all about in practice how he's a better shooter, but it just hasn't come in the games yet. And again, for Udoka, Udoka doesn't get many assists from Devon Dotson. He gets them mostly from Marcus Garrett and other players out there. So for Devon to be this productive, he basically, instead of sharpening his weaknesses, he just strengthened his strengths, which, again, right-hand drive, get to the rim, score, way better. And he was really good last year. Or get to the free throw line, get fouled a bunch, make free throws. Way better than he was a year ago. So it's sort of amazing because you just didn't see much margin for him to get better at what he was already good at. And yet, Devon Dotson's taking that from a 90 to a 99 while keeping some of his weaknesses, like a 30, and that's gone to like a 32 or something. So I think that's probably what Bill Self was talking about, and I agree with that statement, which is basically that I saw Devon Dotson getting better in certain other areas this year, and instead what he's done, he's just said, nope, these are my strengths. I've gotten better at those, and because of that, now I'm probably the not runaway candidate, but definitely a candidate for Big 12 Player of the Year and potentially All-American, first-team All-American.
Yeah, I was thinking about All-American because you've got to come up with five guys, and you're not looking at the usual sources like the ACC necessarily. Mm-hmm. We talk about this season as being a mid-major type of year, and you look at the top 10, just how many are there. And they're great players on a lot of these teams, but they're not the kind you see necessarily on Super Tuesday or Big Monday or the ESPN games during the week on a regular basis. How often have we seen San Diego State play this year, or Gonzaga, or Dayton? Just not as often as we see Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina even. So
yeah, let's riff, Blair. I mean, who are five right now? I mean, I'm thinking Luka Garza, Iowa.
He'll be Big Ten Player of the Year.
Obi Toppin from Dayton. You pick a Jayhawk, I would probably say Devon Dotson.
Powell from Seton Hall.
And then a fifth one, Vernon Carey at Duke, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Is Newel, has he had the numbers from Louisville?
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah. He's probably going to be. I don't know who ACC Player of the Year is going to be.
What about Marcus Howard?
And he's leading the nation in scoring.
Exactly.
Marcus Howard, Marquette, leading the nation at 27 points a game.
It still seems like somewhere in there you can squeeze a Jayhawk, especially with them being number one, the type of season they've had. And I kind of go back to what Gary said. I think that if you're from the outside looking in, the easiest thing to look at is points per game and production. And I told you last week, Blair, I think Devon Dotson's the best player on this team and has contributed the most for them. Obviously Udoka is amazing, and Marcus Garrett has had his amazing moments, so I don't disagree with that particular thought either, but I just think that the easiest path is going to be the one when it comes to these voting. And I just think that Devon is probably going to take a lot of those. Something
to keep in mind, a lot of these kind of ballots close, the voting closes at the end of the regular season, even before conference tournaments. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of decisions will be made on this topic in the next week and a half or so. So, all right, Gary Bedore, Jesse Newel, thanks for stopping by, and we'll talk to you again soon. That'll do it for today and this week on SportsBeat KC, the Stars Daily Sports Podcast. Thanks to the production crew of Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett, along with today's guests, Jesse Newel and Gary Bedore. It's a busy weekend in Kansas City sports with college basketball bearing down on the postseason, Chiefs personnel scouting draft prospects at the NFL Combine, the Royals continuing spring training, and Sporting Kansas City opening their season Saturday night at Vancouver. There'll be plenty to talk about next week on SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.